two top international soccer officials were found guilty on Friday for their roles in a web of corruption that extended across several continents and ensnared dozens of men who control the world's most popular sport. A jury in federal court in Brooklyn on Friday convicted the men: Juan Angel Napout of Paraguay, the former top soccer official of South America, who was accused of accepting $10.5 million in bribes since 2010, and José Maria Marin, the former top soccer official of Brazil, who was accused of accepting $6.55 million. Marin was found guilty on 6 counts of racketeering conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracy. He was found not guilty on 1 count of money laundering conspiracy. Mr. Napout was found guilty on 3 counts of racketeering conspiracy and wire fraud conspiracy. He was found not guilty on 2 counts of money laundering conspiracy. The month-long trial featured incriminating testimony by former associates, but defense lawyers argued that there was little documentary evidence of money changing hands. Both men were convicted of racketeering conspiracy and wire fraud conspiracy, each count of which can carry up to 20 years in prison. Responding to the verdict, FIFA, World Soccer's governing body, released a statement on Friday seizing on its long-held status as a victim in the case and restating the organization's intention to reclaim tens of millions of dollars that the United States has ordered the convicted criminals to forfeit. FIFA strongly supports and encourages the U.S. authorities' efforts to hold accountable those individuals who abused their positions and corrupted international football for their own personal benefit, the statement said. As the jury has found a number of defendants guilty of the charged crimes, FIFA will now take all necessary steps to seek restitution and recover any losses caused by their misconduct. The jury delivered an unusual partial verdict, having communicated to the judge that the group was unable to reach a unanimous decision regarding the 1 count of racketeering conspiracy against Manuel Burga, the former top soccer official of Peru. That charge is the only one faced by Mr. Burga, who has spent much of the 6 days of jury deliberations quietly reading historical fiction. He exited the courtroom on Friday with a rolled-up softcover book of word searches and logic games, noting he had finished his book. The judge ordered the jurors to return for further deliberations regarding his charge next week. The verdicts against Mr. Napout and Mr. Marin partially resolved the trial in the United States case focused on FIFA, the governing body of international soccer that was thrown into chaos when allegations were announced in 2015. Several high-ranking soccer officials were accused of accepting bribes from marketing companies that wanted to obtain commercial rights to major competitions. More than 20 defendants had pleaded guilty as a result of the investigation run by the Justice Department out of the Eastern District of New York in coordination with the FBI and the Internal Revenue Service. But the 3 officials who stood trial this month were in the minority, as they actively fought the mountainous evidence the government laid out. The 3 men had spent the week pacing the 4th floor of the federal courthouse in downtown Brooklyn as the jury deliberated. Mr. Napout, often linking arms with his children and wife, was alternately somber and jovial, reminiscing about Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd concerts he had attended, singing When I'm 64 by the Beatles and miming guitar strums, and quoting The Godfather. His adult daughters spent afternoons with coloring books in the court's cafeteria. Mr. Burga quietly read the 3rd book in a trilogy by the Spanish author Santiago Posteguillo, a novel about the fall of the Roman Empire. Killing time, he said in Spanish. I'm keeping my mind from falling asleep. Mr. Marin, 85 and the former governor of the state of São Paulo, sat in the spare courtroom and said little. Days before his own conviction, Mr. Marin's predecessor as Governor Paulo Maluf, whom Mr. Marin served as deputy, had been jailed in Brazil for corruption. United States District Court Judge Pamela K. Chen ordered that Mr. Knophout and Mr. Marin be taken into custody immediately on Friday, considering them flight risks. Each had long been living locally under house arrest, with Mr. Marin occupying his Trump Tower apartment in Manhattan since last year. The judge said she considered it unlikely that either man could successfully appeal the decision against him, and that each should expect to serve time in prison. In spite of Mr. Marin's arguments about his advanced age, the wire frauds I think are very straightforward, she said, going on to cite the vast amounts of wealth at their disposal, before dispatching court officers to take them into custody. The defendants at this point have every reason to flee now that they've heard the verdict. Across decades, the three men and their predecessors, power brokers in global soccer, laundered hundreds of millions of dollars, much of it through the United States, according to the government. They diverted that money from the sport and into their own pockets by accepting kickbacks and bribes associated with soccer media and marketing contracts. The schemes had been outlined in indictments unsealed years ago but were deconstructed with testimony and other evidence at this month's trial. In incidental asides, witnesses implicated media executives at companies such as Fox as well as South American government officials. They referenced bribe payments that helped, for example, steer FIFA's 2022 World Cup to Qatar. For a case that has commanded global interest, especially in South and Central America, the details of the schemes as well as basic information about tournaments like the World Cup were painstakingly translated to the jury of New Yorkers, with analogies drawn to baseball, and the Mets and the Yankees specifically. The case is among the largest criminal prosecutions announced by the United States in recent years, with more than 40 defendants charged, all but a handful of them foreign nationals. Few of those who pleaded guilty have been punished at this point. In November, the former president of Guatemala's Soccer Association, who admitted to wire fraud and wire fraud conspiracy, was the first to be sentenced. He received 8 months in prison. As Mr. Burga's fate remained undecided, his lawyer on Friday had argued against publicizing the jury's partial verdict, suggesting that it might prompt prejudice against his client, who was scrutinized early in the trial for possible witness tampering. We all hear stories about crazy uncles at the Thanksgiving table or the Christmas table, said Bruce Udolph, Mr. Burga's lawyer. There can be a lot of unwanted influences, no matter how conscientious a jury may be.